1903, two teams were racing to achieve powered flight. One team had a government grant, a Harvard education, the best engineers money could hire, a War Department contract, and full coverage from the New York Times. The other team had a bicycle shop. The first team quit the moment they lost. The second team changed the world forever. And the difference between them had nothing to do with resources, intelligence, or luck. It had everything to do with one question. Why?
Here's something that will permanently change how you see every business, every leader, and every decision you make in your career. There are thousands of companies that make smartphones, hundreds that make laptops, dozens that make tablets. They all have access to the same technology, the same engineers, the same markets, the same customers. So why do people camp outside Apple stores for 3 days, in the rain, to buy a product that costs twice as much as its competitors? Why do Harley-Davidson riders tattoo a corporate logo on their skin? Why did 250,000 people travel to Washington, D.C. on their own dime on a Wednesday for a march that nobody paid them to attend? It is not charisma. It is not marketing budgets. It is not luck. It is one thing that the most influential leaders, brands, and movements in human history all have in common, and that most businesses, most leaders, and most people completely ignore. Simon Sinek spent years studying this pattern, and in Start With Why, he lays out the answer in one of the clearest, most powerful business frameworks ever written. This is the full breakdown.
Section 01. The Golden Circle. Let's start with the framework that anchors this entire book. Sinek calls it the Golden Circle. Draw 3 concentric rings, like a bullseye. The outermost ring is labeled what. The middle ring is labeled how. The innermost ring, the very center, is labeled why. Every single organization on Earth knows their what. It's the product they sell, the service they offer, the output they produce. A car company makes cars. A law firm provides legal services. A restaurant serves food. Crystal clear. A good number of organizations also know their how, the things that make them different, their proprietary process, their culture, their unique method. We use only organic ingredients. We offer same-day delivery. Our engineers have an average of 12 years of experience. The how is the pitch. It's what most companies put in their marketing. But here is where it gets interesting. Almost nobody knows their why. And Sinek is very precise about what he means by why. He does not mean profit. Profit is a result, not a purpose. He does not mean mission statements. Most of those are just whats, dressed up in fancier language. The why is your core.
The why is your core belief, the reason your organization exists beyond making money, the cause that drives every decision, the thing that if you said it out loud to the right person, they would immediately say, "I believe that too." Here is the critical pattern Sinek discovered. Most companies communicate from the outside in. They start with what, then maybe how, and they rarely get to why at all. Walk into a Best Buy, read almost any ad. Here is our new laptop. It has 32 gigabytes of RAM, a 4K display, and a 12-hour battery. It's beautifully designed. Want to buy one? That's outside-in communication. What first? Now listen to how Apple actually communicates.
They don't open with, "We make great computers."
They open with a belief. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. That's the why. Then how? We do this by making products that are beautifully designed, simple, and user-friendly. Then what? And we happen to make computers. Want to buy one? Same information, completely different emotional result. One sounds like a company talking at you. The other sounds like a leader talking to you. Now here is the question that should already be forming in your mind. Why does leading with why actually work on human beings? Why does the order matter? The answer is in your brain, literally. The human brain is divided into sections that correspond almost exactly to the golden circle. The outermost layer, the neocortex, is responsible for rational thought, analytical processing, and language. When you hear facts, features, and logical arguments, this is the part of your brain being activated. The inner sections, the limbic brain, are responsible for feelings, trust, loyalty, and behavior. This is the part that processes gut instinct, emotional connection, and the sense that something just feels right. Here's the catch. The limbic brain has no capacity for language. It cannot process facts and data, but it is the part of the brain that controls decisions. This is why you've been in a situation where someone gave you every logical reason to choose something, and you still felt hesitant. Your neocortex was sold. Your limbic brain wasn't. And your limbic brain won. When companies lead with what, they're speaking only to the neocortex. They're appealing to logic, and logic alone does not drive behavior. When leaders start with why, they speak directly to the limbic brain. They trigger emotion, trust, and the feeling of shared belief. And that feeling drives decisions, loyalty, and action in ways that no spec sheet ever will. We do not make purely rational decisions. We make emotional decisions and then use logic to justify them. Companies that understand this build devoted customers. Companies that don't, no matter how good their product is, are always fighting for attention, always cutting prices, always trying to convince. Section 2. The proof. Apple, Wright Brothers, MLK. Sinek doesn't just give you theory. He proves it with 3 case studies that are impossible to argue with. Case study 1. Apple versus every other computer company. In the 1990s, Apple was weeks from bankruptcy. A single partnership decision, Microsoft investing $150 million, kept them alive. They were not dominant. They were not untouchable. They were nearly dead. Then Steve Jobs returned. And he didn't launch a new product strategy. He reconnected Apple to its why. Apple's core belief has never changed. Challenge the status quo. Think differently. Make technology that empowers human creativity. Every product since then, the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, is just a different expression of that same belief. The products changed. The why never did. Dell, by contrast, makes excellent computers. Gateway made excellent computers. Compaq made excellent computers. But none of them ever gave you a reason to believe in them. They gave you specs. Apple gives you identity. That's why Apple can launch a music player, and people buy it without hesitation, even though nobody asked Apple to be in the music business. That's why Apple can launch a phone and topple Nokia, the most dominant mobile brand in history, within 3 years. When you trust the why, you trust everything that flows from it. Dell tried to launch an MP3 player. It was actually a competitive product. Nobody cared, because nobody believed in Dell the way they believed in Apple. Dell had built a what company. Apple had built a why company. Case study 2. The Wright Brothers
versus Samuel Langley.
He had a $50,000 grant from the War Department, an enormous sum at the time. He had a team of the finest engineers. He had a regular column in the press. He had institutional support from the Smithsonian. By every objective measure, he was going to win. Orville and Wilbur Wright had none of that. No formal engineering training, no government funding, no press attention. They ran a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio. Their entire operation was funded out of their own pocket. And yet, on December 17th, 1903, at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the Wright brothers flew. What was the difference? Langley wanted to be famous. He wanted the glory of being the man who conquered flight. He was driven by the outcome, the achievement, the recognition, the result. His motivation was external. The Wright brothers were driven by a belief. They genuinely believed that powered flight would change the world, that it would open up human civilization in ways nobody could fully imagine. They were not chasing fame. They were chasing the dream itself. And that distinction made every difference in how they operated.
Langley hired the best people money could buy. The Wright brothers attracted people who shared their belief, people who would work through failure after failure, in the cold, in the middle of nowhere, without pay, because they believed in what they were doing. Langley pursued every competitive advantage. The Wright brothers pursued the mission. And here is the detail that seals the case. When news broke that the Wright brothers had succeeded, Langley quit immediately. He did not say, "Let me study what they did and improve on it." He did not say, "Let me study what they did and improve on it." He said he was done. Because Langley was never actually trying to fly. He was trying to win. Once someone else won, there was nothing left for him to pursue. The Wright brothers, if they had lost, would have kept going, because the dream was bigger than the outcome. Case Study 3, Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington. On August 28, 1963, 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. No Facebook event, no email list, no viral marketing campaign. Most people who showed up had never heard King speak in person. Many of them had traveled hundreds of miles at their own expense on a weekday to stand in the summer heat. Why? Because Martin Luther King Jr. didn't give people a plan. He gave them a belief. He said, "I have a dream." Not, "I have a 12-point policy proposal." Not, "I have a detailed implementation framework for racial equity reform." A dream. A vision of a world built on a belief that he and his listeners already shared, but had never heard said so clearly, so powerfully, or so publicly. The people who showed up at that march were not showing up for King. They were showing up for themselves, for the expression of something they already believed, but needed a voice for. That is what great why leaders do. They don't convince people of something new. They give language to a belief people already carry. And those people follow, not out of obligation, but out of identity. Section 3. The Law of Diffusion. Here is where Sinek connects the why to a concrete business principle. In 1962, a sociologist named Everett Rogers published a model called the Diffusion of Innovation, one of the most replicated findings in social science. Rogers observed that any new idea, product, or behavior spreads through a population in a predictable pattern.
The first 2.5% of a market are innovators, the people who show up on day one. They'd buy a half-finished product just to be part of something new. The next 13.5% are early adopters, visionaries who see potential before proof exists. Then comes the early majority, practical, pragmatic people who move once they see others moving. Then the late majority, skeptics who adopt when it becomes the standard. And finally, laggards, people who resist until resistance is no longer an option. The insight that matters for business, the tipping point, the moment a product or idea becomes mainstream, occurs at roughly 15 to 18% market penetration. Once you've converted the innovators and early adopters, the early majority follows almost automatically. Social proof takes over. But here is what almost every business gets wrong.
They spend all their energy trying to market to the early majority first, because it's the biggest group, because it seems logical to go for the mass market. And it fails, or it requires enormous cost, massive discounts, heavy advertising, constant convincing. Because the early majority does not move on belief. They move on proof. They need to see it working before they adopt it. The innovators and early adopters, however, do not need proof. They need belief. They move on feeling and vision and shared values. They are the ones who waited in line for the original iPhone, a product with a buggy operating system, no third-party apps, and a price most people called insane. They were not buying a phone. They were buying into a why. Your job, if you want to build something that spreads, is not to convince the masses. Your job is to find the people who already believe what you believe. Those people will sell for you. They will recruit for you. They will stay loyal when competitors come with better specs and lower prices. Because they're not buying what you make. They're buying why you make it.
Section 04. Trust, Manipulation, and the Celery Test. Sinek draws one of the most important distinctions in the book here, the line between manipulation and inspiration. Manipulation is any tactic that produces a short-term behavior change without creating genuine belief. Think about the tactics you see every single day. Price cuts, buy one get one offers, fear-based advertising, aspirational messaging, celebrity endorsements, limited time offers, social proof through statistics. These are all manipulations. None of them are inherently evil. Many of them work in the short term. But they don't build loyalty. They build transactions. A customer who came to you because of a discount will leave you for a competitor who offers a bigger discount. A customer who came to you because they believe what you believe will stay even when the competitor is cheaper. Manipulation requires constant investment. You always need a bigger promotion, a louder ad, a scarier threat. The moment you stop spending, behavior stops too. Inspiration compounds. Every authentic action reinforces the why. Every product that delivers on the belief deepens the trust. Every hire who embodies the values strengthens the culture. You build something that feeds itself. Now, here is Sinek's Celery Test, a simple framework for applying your why to daily decisions. You're at a dinner party. People keep giving you business advice. One person says, get on TikTok. Another says, use LinkedIn influencers. A third says, lower your price point. A fourth says, add a loyalty program. A fifth says, go into podcasting. Without a clear why, all of that advice sounds reasonable, so you chase all of it. You're exhausted, you're inconsistent, and you have no identity. Now imagine you know your why. Say you're a company that believes technology should be simple and human. Now you go to the store of ideas. You pick the ones that match that belief. You skip the ones that don't, not because they're bad ideas, but because... Section 5. Why leaders lose their why. One of the most important warnings in this book is about what happens to companies after they succeed. Sinek calls it the split, the moment when success causes an organization to shift its focus from why to what. Every great company starts with a founder who is driven by genuine belief. Jobs wanted to challenge the status quo. Walt Disney wanted to make people happy. Sam Walton believed working-class Americans deserved access to great products at great prices. But then the company scales. The founder can't be in every room. Employees get hired who never met the founder. Shareholders demand quarterly results. Managers replace leaders. Processes replace passion. And slowly, without anyone deciding it, the organization drifts. Decisions start being made based on numbers rather than belief. The why becomes a line in the annual report rather than a living force in the products become ordinary. The best employees start leaving. Customers feel a vague sense that something has changed, even if they can't name it. The company is still profitable, but it has lost something. The solution is not nostalgia. It's institutionalization. The why must be embedded into hiring, culture, language, and decision-making before the founder's direct influence fades. The question every scaling organization must ask is not how do we grow? It's how do we make sure our why survives our growth? The most enduring organizations, Apple, Disney, Southwest Airlines in its prime, are ones where the why was so deeply embedded that it outlasted the people who started it. The worst corporate disasters often trace back to the moment the why was replaced by pure financial motivation.
Final section. What this means for you. Here is where this gets personal. This book is not just for CEOs. It is not just for people launching startups. The golden circle applies to your career, your team, your decisions, and your life. Think about the work you've done in your life where you felt most energized, most creative, most connected, most effective. Almost certainly, that work was aligned with something you genuinely believed in. The cause mattered to you. The mission felt real. Now think about the work that drained you, the jobs that felt hollow despite good pay, the projects that felt meaningless even when they succeeded. That's what happens when you operate at the level of what with no why underneath it. Sinek's challenge is not to find a better strategy. It is to find your belief. What do you believe that drives everything you do? What is the through line of your best work, your strongest relationships, your most meaningful contributions? When you can answer that clearly, honestly, specifically, you have your why. And when you lead from that why, something changes. The right people find you. Decisions become easier. Your work becomes a statement of identity, not just a source of income. The most successful leaders in history. If this breakdown changed how you see leadership and business, then you're exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Start with Why by Simon Sinek. Read it, live it, lead from it. If you want the next full breakdown, subscribe because we are just getting started.